Okay, so trying to get back into the reading group here. Really let the reading group lag behind. I think partly because I've been waiting for people to give some responses here. This last month we were going to do Birth and Death of Meaning by Ernest Becker, and I did post, I guess, an initial video there, and I've talked a little bit about some of the issues about Becker. We are, I was hoping that other people were going to post some video responses up to the text. This has been a little bit less engaged than some of the other readings, which is fine. Maybe I'll just say a couple things about the text here, and then I do want to go on to denial of death, and I'm going to try to post a couple of videos on denial of death. And please check out the channel that's Pangea Progress. I guess it's Pangea Progress. Check out that channel. It's such a great collection of Ernest Becker videos on there. I want to talk a little bit about just a couple of chapters from here. Obviously it's a major text, and there's no way to just in a couple of minutes sum up what's being said. I think for my own purposes, and maybe talking about how it relates to denial of death and then how that relates to escape from evil, what I would do is just focus on what is chapter 7, 8, and 9, and maybe a little bit into 10. And what Becker's trying to do is look at the significant role that self-esteem plays in humans. I mean, this is sort of the argument that he's giving, that humans are animals like other animals are, but because of language, they get tangled into a kind of inner world and a self-reflexivity and this ego encumbrance that makes immediate action, sort of spontaneous, unreflective action, to some degree impossible. Now, we still do have spontaneous, I guess, reactions to the world around us, but the more that we become, say, humanized through language, the more that the animal needs a kind of anxiety buffer to keep meaningful action proceeding. A different way to say it is that animals aren't encumbered with a sense of self in the same way that humans are. The self is largely a linguistic contrivance that's negotiated across time and with others, and it has an inwardness, a kind of inner depth. What is so interesting in Becker's work is that he looks at a kind of Freudian orientation in the sense that he thinks something like a psychoanalysis is needed. Now, here's what's so important for Becker, is he calls it psychoanalytic characterology. Okay? Now, when he talks about psychoanalytic characterology, what Becker is trying to say, and again, this is the book that I'm trying to move out of here, right? What Becker is trying to say is that people are motivated for reasons of which they are unaware. And the main reason of why people do what they do isn't, as Freud suggested, you want to have sex with one parent and kill the other. It's not that. It's not the eros thanatos. Instead, there's a drive for self-esteem and self-worth. That if the organism can convince itself that it has a kind of worth and value, a secured position in the world, in terms of either a self-worth that's conferred by others or a self-worth that's conferred by meaningful engagement with the world, right? I think both of those become very important as we develop our self-esteem. I mean, it's manual dexterity, right? I mean, there is a sense in which learning to operate your body and to have manipulative control over the world makes you feel good and strong, and it confirms a sense of self-worth. But what happens is the sense of self-worth slowly has to be bargained and negotiated in a social world that's meaningful. So, for example, it can be really fun to chase the kitty around and pull on the kitty's tail, but the parents come around and say, don't do that. A good boy or a good girl doesn't hurt the pet. Or it might be fun to go run around and smash up the flowers in the flower beds or play with the mashed potatoes. The child is slowly, through parental imposition and through forms of blocking, the child is taught don't do that and learns to take, as Becker says, self-esteem through the mother's mouth rather than the mother's milk. You know, if at first it's just parental care makes the baby feel that all is well, and then slowly the developing body feels that all is well as it learns to walk upright and move things around and manipulate its world, slowly self-worth becomes symbolic. It becomes more and more a linguistic set of a linguistically created set of values and beliefs, and senses of role intertwine with self-esteem to such a degree that what Becker wants to say is that what we see as cultural forms out in the world, personality types, sort of like personality types and cultural forms, they dovetail together as both allow for the ongoing and sustained sense of self-worth and the distribution of self-worth. I think so much of what Becker is doing in this early work, right, and he's really not at denial of death, but he starts to see a kind of the possibility of a true science of the human, and that what we need to understand is that Freud was right in one regard, that people are driven by motives of which they're unaware. Freud was wrong about what those motives were. He thinks he's found the true motive. That is, there is a kind of organismal anxiety that gets ushered in with the self-reflexive interiority that language creates and social practices sustain and make possible. And as a result of that, that anxiety has to be buffered, and it gets buffered through the emergence of social practices, through everything from stratification of items of worth and value, like that allow for class systems. So the person who thinks that they have the keys to the executive toilet, that somehow they're superior to a person who doesn't drive that fancy of a car, and the people who dress in a certain way. All of these things are petitions for self-worth. And what Becker starts to see is that what we need is a kind of true science that will enable the maximal amount of meaning. And he starts to see human, he starts to define the human as homo heroica. That is the human is the heroic ape. It's the animal that needs some sort of heroic meaning structure, and cultural forms for him are impoverished. That is, that it's sort of demeaning to have the individual take his self-esteem from such a petty thing as what kind of car you drive, or how fancy of a purse you have, or how big your office is. He says, ancient peoples were able to achieve so much more robust senses of self-worth and meaningful action when they participated in rituals that sort of put them in the fabric of the cosmos and of the ultimate world, and so of the world's ultimate meaning. And so I think what he's trying to move toward is what we need is this science that would begin with self-esteem and try to understand the human need for ultimate worth and meaning, the largest possible frames of meaning that do the least amount of damage. And here's where he starts to see, I guess a rationalization need that is, I guess, the justification for religion, that religion provides a heroic backdrop for ultimate meaning. But you can already see him starting in this book to sense that death provides the obstacle, that death is going to haunt the quest for ultimate meaning, because we're animals, and we're animals who are going to die. And that even though we're animals whose instincts have become overwritten by a need for fantasies and for ultimate worth and value, I think Becker is still struggling with the bodily basis of meaning, of what it means to fashion the world and to take care of items, and the sort of symbolic meanings, and how those, maybe he's overdrawing the distinction. At any rate, please check it out. Shoot up something on this, something from Denial of Death very soon. Okay, thanks.